I'll turn it over to you, Tiernan. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Priscilla, and thanks everybody for having me today. I'm really excited to be here. It's really fantastic to learn about all the great work that you've been doing. I've gotten to talk to Priscilla a couple times, and I'm just so blown away by everything that you're working on. I'm the Member Services Coordinator for the Fire Adapted Communities Learning Network, which is affectionately known as FAC Net. And I'll get to a little bit more about that in just a moment. But just wanted to say again, really excited to be here. My mom was born in Healdsburg, so it's always been a legend in my household, and just really blown away to see how much you've accomplished. So I will go ahead and share my screen here, and you can tell me if I did it right or not. Hopefully you're all seeing. Great, thank you. Appreciate the thumbs up, that's awesome. So my goal here today is just to share more about what the Fire Adapted Communities Learning Network is, a little bit about where it came from, and then to discuss what it means to be a fire adapted community, since that term, that FAC, comes up a lot when you're talking to different groups, and you might hear FAC partners, or this is a FAC project, and it can get pretty jargony. So this is my contribution to the alphabet soup today, is through FAC. So looking at starting off, what is FAC Net? Again, the Fire Adapted Communities Learning Network. It was formed in 2013 in response to practitioner demand. And when I say practitioner, I mean anyone who is working at a more than individual scale on fire adaptation. And we'll get to what fire adaptation itself means in a couple minutes. But FAC Net is a national network of people that are working to build sustainable wildfire resilience capacity in fire-prone communities, or to make their communities better able to respond to, recover from, and be resilient in the face of fire. The network is a result of a partnership among the Watershed Research and Training Center in Hayfork, California, the Nature Conservancy, the USDA Forest Service, and the Department of Interior, as well as the many wildfire resilience practitioners that make up our membership. So we, as part of the Nature Conservancy's work, we also are kind of sister networks to the Fire Learning Network, the TREX program, and the Indigenous Peoples Burning Network. So there's a lot of prescribed fire networks that go along with FAC Net. FAC Net takes a nationwide approach. We are a kind of broad scope focus on the people that are working to make their communities more fire adapted. So the network itself has the objectives to demonstrate fire adaptation in a variety of contexts that represent the diversity of communities with wildfire risk in the United States. So you can see we have members all across the United States. We have about 400 members within the network who work in a really wide variety of landscapes, ecosystems, political environments, and all just a really wide spectrum of people and different types of places. So we are helping people innovate and experiment with new practices to enhance fire adaptation before, during, and after wildfires, and really share and spread knowledge and practice among network members, and spark and support fire adaptation efforts of other practitioners in locations outside of the network. So all of the work that you're doing, this is part of a really nationwide effort to better work with fire and to help communities adapt to the needs of their place and their community members. So as I said previously, who is FAC Net? FAC Net's members are people working at a larger than individual scale on fire adaptation. So this could be HOA members, wildland urban interface mitigation coordinators, state foresters, community leaders, all sorts of different people. And this is really one of the major strengths of the networks, is that diversity of backgrounds that members have, as well as the differences in interests, approaches, funding sources, political situations, and ecosystems. So this creates this unique membership, creates this really special place to share lessons learned, find innovations and ideas that can be adapted to different places. And FACnet is really committed to this idea of working well in your place. And it's about long-term change and creating long-term change in your place and adapting to the needs of what your community as the climate changes, as political systems change. It's really about finding the fire adaptation processes that are going to work with your place and with your people. So what do we mean when we say fire adapted communities? This is really talking about a framework for community wildfire resilience. At its most basic, it's a concept that came out of the National Cohesive Strategy to help communities think about actions that they can take to live better with wildfire. And fire adapted communities, or FAC, is not a one-size-fits-all approach. It's not a checklist. It's not a specific set of actions that a community has to take. So the beauty and squishiness of FAC as a framework is that communities of all sizes, economies, policies, etc., can take ideas and concepts and adapt them to meet their local needs. There's also not an endpoint to this. Your community is always changing. The people who live in your community are changing, the political environments, the ecosystems. So this means that fire adaptation is never done. You're never just going to get to a point where you can tie a bow on it. It's something that we need to check in on and see how we need to adapt, monitor and evaluate and change priorities over time. And your local context is really vital to this. You are the ones who know your communities the best. So FAC is not about someone from the outside telling you what to do, but it's about helping you think about who and how to engage in your community, what partners are at the table, and think about the suite of potential actions and programs that you could tackle. So looking at this in more of our graphic form, this is just emphasizes the fact that all of us have a role to play in fire adaptation. Community members, local wildfire practitioners, businesses, tourists, land managers, state and local government, federal agencies, researchers. We all have a role to play somewhere in fire adaptation, and oftentimes more than one role. Traditional community wildfire practitioners can't do everything on their own, and it's imperative that the whole community is considered when moving fire adaptation work forward. So obviously you've already done a lot of work on this, finding approaches and partners that work best for your place. And this is really critical to think about who you're working with on your FAC efforts. So practitioners working on smoke outreach, for example, might want to partner with public health officials, a local tourism group or chamber of commerce, and local politicians. And it's helpful to have this support and input from partners so you can really share the load. Now you notice that this graphic doesn't say what each partner should take on or what exactly people should do. And we don't want to limit or silo people or organizations because the context and strengths of those partnerships will be different in every single place. Thinking about when fire adaptation work takes place, sometimes people think that FAC work is purely associated with preparedness and mitigation. But in reality, a community can work and engage at all points along the fire cycle. So FAC work involves post-fire recovery and business resilience. It includes enabling conditions for managed fire, prescribed fire in appropriate places and contexts, and it includes homeowner preparedness actions as well. So FAC is about the community resilience work that can be done before, during, and after a fire. And much of this work is cyclical and never ending, and it's always good to review and adapt your approaches and priorities. So before I get into our graphic and our approach, I wanted to check in and see if there were any questions on any of that fire hose of information.
I don't see any hands raised, Tiernan, and there's nothing in the chat right now.
All right, well, I'll keep going then. Thank you, Priscilla, for the check-in. So getting a little bit more concrete into FAC work, we call this our FAC wheel. This was developed by the Fire Adapted Communities Learning Network, and it was designed to help explain the Fire Adapted Communities framework. So it describes a set of components that make up community wildfire adaptation and gives examples of specific programs and activities that communities can undertake to reduce their wildfire risk. So obviously FAC is not a one-size-fits-all approach, and different communities and different stakeholders will use different tools. And so this graphic just gives some examples. It's not comprehensive by any means at all, but it gives some examples of some of the programs and actions that a community can take in working on and expanding their fire adaptation practices. So the idea there of a community is really at the heart of this, and it's also works to kind of expand a lot of people's views of what fire adaptation looks like. So you might get people coming in through one doorway, through FireWise, for example. We have a lot of FireWise communities that are members of FAC Net, which is fantastic. But what we see is that the FireWise program is an awesome program, and it is something that exists within a much wider universe of fire adaptation activities and projects. And so that's often an entryway where people do have that checklist. They can go through a series of steps, and then they can see, okay, we need to work on this other item next. So we might start with resident mitigation and then move into partnerships and larger community engagement. So it's this recognition that truly changing our wildfire outcomes requires a diverse set of projects, a diverse set of actions, and a diverse set of partners. So this next piece of the wheel is we have kind of broad categories or buckets that these actions might fit into. So you start with the community, and then the community can undertake these kind of categorical actions like looking at public health, prevention, regulations, policies or plans, infrastructure and business, recovery, safety and evacuation, wildfire response, resident mitigation. These are just some categories that we see come up over and over again. And so we start with the community discussions, community identification of priorities within these buckets. And then from these buckets, you can move on to these more specific actions which form the outer ring of this FAC wheel. So it's those three components of the community itself, those prioritization of those different buckets, and then deciding on some specific actions that you want to take within those categories themselves. So looking at kind of one track here, we can see the community in the center. The community might want to work on safety and evacuation as part of their fire adaptation. And so how they choose to work on that safety and evacuation piece might be represented by a variety of ways or projects. So they could incorporate Ready, Set, Go program that addresses both pre-fire preparedness work as well as evacuation. You could establish internal safety zones within the community, or work on improved ingress and egress routes and signage, or help with outreach around personal preparedness, such as go kits and evacuation plans. And as you can tell, this is not in any way, shape, or form the full complement of activities that you can undertake having to do with safety and evacuation, but identifying one of that category as a priority and then working on projects within that category can help unify people around different areas of fire adaptation that they might want to prioritize in a given setting. Diane, did you have your hand up?
I do. Thank you. I'm a little confused. You know, these topics, these are just fabulous topics, and we're engaged or seek to be engaged on a lot of these topics. I'm wondering, how is it that we interact, how we could interact with your organization? I mean, is it that you all share best practices, or you have resources, or you meet and you exchange ideas? I'm just kind of down at the practical level, trying to think, how do we engage with you all, and how do we get benefit from that engagement? Yeah.
Sure. Yeah. So Priscilla is and COPE have joined the Fire Adapted Communities Learning Network as a core member. And so as a core member of the Fire Adapted Communities Network, this means a highly engaged member of the network, where and engaged means that you've got access to all of our learning groups and activities. So we have trainings and workshops that happen throughout the year. Priscilla mentioned one of them right at the outset of the call. We are currently offering what's called a FAC ambassador training to members in California and Hawaii. And what a FAC ambassador is basically a neighborhood or community member who's trained to go out and deliver fire adaptation messaging to their neighbors. So they are like an extension of staff. They can help people spread information about mitigation days. They can help set up chipping days, whatever those priorities in your community look like. Those FAC ambassadors can help with and help spread the word. And so this specific workshop is a good example of the network in action, because it is being taught by members from Colorado who have developed this program, and it's being offered to members in California and Hawaii. So there's a lot of information and practical experience within the network members themselves. And so they will sometimes teach other network members workshops. We have an online workspace called Podio, where people can ask questions at any time, and just basically a message board where people can exchange information and share lessons learned about fire adaptation from across the country. And then there are, so we have our workshops, our message board, our online workspace. We also have, we're moving to a slightly different funding model for members. Affiliate members have small opportunity funds that they can apply for to kind of push projects over the finish line. Core members have access to larger funding pools where they can get contract funding to do specific projects that are in their work plans for the year. So they'll identify priorities that they want to work on with FAC Net through the year, and then they can apply for contract funding for those projects during that year. And then members also have access to staff time for things like strategic planning, for workshop, for if they need like an extra staff person on a project, we will do that as well. So those are the basic benefits that you get as a FAC Net member and core member. Does that make sense? Did that help? Okay, sorry for leaving out that vital basic information. Thanks for the question. Any other questions? All right, so just to give you a couple more concrete examples of what FAC looks like in action, some of our members are, this is just a taste of the wide variety of projects that our members are working on throughout the network. So our group in Ely, Minnesota has been working so hard to get chainsaw classes for their community members so that they can get people more trained up in how to use chainsaws. And they finally got a chainsaw class going, which was, they were so excited about it. They've been doing a lot of partnership building with federal agencies, because in their place, they are surrounded by a lot of US Forest Service land. And so building that partnership was really important. And how they did that was by actually helping the Forest Service with community outreach and communication about a large wildfire that had come through that area. And so they ended up having a whole community day with all of these different events, and created a kind of a movie about what had happened during that fire. And so they are moving forward with a really strong partnership there. And then they're also focusing on communications and outreach with the indigenous tribes in that area, and have created some really wonderful videos capturing some of the indigenous experience and land stewardship practices there. The New Jersey Pine Barrens, they are offering prescribed burn trainings, and building relationships, a very common theme within our network, with local and state officials, and now partnering with a local university to create a training and leadership programs for fire adaptation practitioners. So they're really working to push fire adaptation work forward, but also to ensure that there's a really strong succession model in New Jersey, and that they can continue to build on and expand their fire adaptation work there. Washington State has an incredibly strong state network of fire adaptation practitioners, and their focus right now is working with Latinx populations to develop and share appropriate resources and to support and nurture fire adaptation practitioners, especially in Spanish-speaking communities across the state. And then ASHLAND, Oregon has been a core member of FAC Net for an incredibly long time, but they are working on it, still expanding their SmokeWise program. They have very strong partnerships, especially with their business community, and they're continuing to work on evacuation modeling and planning as well. So just a taste of the really different types of things that FAC Net members are working on. But again, these are all part of that FAC framework and all fit into these different kind of categories or buckets of fire adaptation. And I just wanted to highlight these partnerships that ASHLAND has built for their SmokeWise program, because it's a really kind of wide variety of folks. They have a very big outdoor Shakespeare festival there, as I'm sure you know, and just having that as one of their partners for fire adaptation just shows the kind of strength of the diversity that of people involved in fire adaptation, and how important it is to bring together not only local government, but also the arts, the universities there, the fire rescue, and even hotels. And they are now actually contracting with the Chamber of Commerce to get even more fire adaptation work going in their business community. So I just wanted to pause again and ask if there are any questions at this point. All right, so I would like.
Actually, I have one quick one if I can. I see down in the wildfire response wedge of the wheel, you've got community interface with incident management teams. Do you have any specific examples of what kind of work's been done in that area? It's so important, but it's also tricky to do.
Yes, and I'm sorry, this has been like a series of calls with FAC Net members to discuss how communities can interface with incident management teams, and to work with the variety of members in the network to find out how different types of groups have interfaced with incident management teams. And so I don't have the results of that working group at my fingertips. I apologize about that. But that's the sort of thing that FAC Net does, is to bring those different groups together to share information like that, and to, if there's enough demand and ongoing demand, to actually create a community of practice around it. So people will hold regular calls to continue discussing topics such as that. There's like actually a wood utilization community of practice that meets regularly to talk about how to dispose of biomass or work with biomass. There's also a community of practice for the neighborhood ambassador program, the training that Priscilla's taking right now. And so there's these ongoing support opportunities and conversation opportunities where people will delve further into topics like the IMTs, and to discuss how those might work best in people's different places and what the best approach might be.
I have a question too. I'm sorry. Susie up in Cloverdale. How does this run financially? Because I remember seeing something about our Sonoma County CWPP, that they had identified some fire adapted communities, which I'm assuming must be part of this program. And I know there was a question that they received about, well, can I be in a fire adapted committee, or can my community be one too? And they said, oh, no, we've just got these limited ones. It's kind of a pilot program and we'll see where we go from there. But I wondered, how is it funded?
So the Fire Adapted Communities Learning Network is funded through the Forest Service, the Department of Interior, and the Nature Conservancy, as well as a couple other funders. So there's a big partnership that goes into FAC Net in particular. Now, as to the fire adapted communities that you're referring to, I'm not exactly sure what those are, just because FAC can be a term that is thrown, like the iChiefs will also use FAC, and the Firewise program is a FAC partner. So that term does come up a lot. It's irritating. It can be very confusing. And
it could be totally separate. It could be a totally separate thing.
Yeah, so we do have
Okay.
opportunity funds for FACNet affiliate members to apply for, and funding opportunities, larger funding opportunities for FACNet core members. But yeah, I'm sorry, I'm not sure exactly what the CWPP connection is there.
Thanks.
Yeah, Marshall.
Yeah, I was just going to help Susie out. I mean, it's a little tricky because there's all these different state, federal things. Remember, there's also Firewise USA, which is through NFPA, very similar to CPP. And then in the state of California, there's a new program out, which I think, Susie, this is probably what you were asking about. And I'll put the link in the chat. It's, I believe it's called California Risk Reduction Community Facility application we put in for. And so that's a pilot thing. That's a brand new thing that's coming out, more targeted for the insurance. But in all reality, all this stuff is very, very, very similar. And that's what also makes it very, very, very confusing. So this is just another great tool to kind of ultimately do the same thing. But this is in line with the national strategy. You know, we're at lower levels at state. California is unique in itself. Colorado's kind of unique. Washington's unique. But honestly, they don't have it figured out either. So we're all planning the same thing right here. So it's confusing, but I can try to help you guys out too.
Thanks a lot.
Yes, it's a great message. Nobody has it figured out, but everyone's trying really hard and has very good intentions. And I think a key difference, as Marshall was saying, is that FACNet does have resources and lessons learned that you can pull from around the country. It's not focused on specifically on any one state, but we support across the country.
Yeah, and I didn't mean to say it in a bad way. People talk Boulder County, Colorado having it figured out, and I've talked to them and they don't got it figured out and they'll admit it. So everyone's learning. I don't think there's any great model out there. If there was, everyone would be doing it already. This is none of this is easy. So.
No, it's definitely not easy, but I think it just underscores the importance of COPE and the work that you are all doing to not only commit to meeting regularly, to building relationships, to developing your community leaders, but also to putting in the work to figure it out and to figure out what works best for where you are. And that's an incredible power that you guys have and commitment that you have. So I'm just really laud you for that.
Thank you. Any other questions for Tiernan? Because I think we're getting ready to do some breakouts. Am I right?
Yes, I have. I'm going to ask you to put your own spin on the FAC wheel here. So I've given you a link where the graphic is available in case you haven't memorized it. I can't see the chat right now. I apologize. But I can also drop the file itself in there. But what I would like to do is to break up into small groups, and I'm going to ask that you take a section of the FAC wheel that you're excited about, or maybe that you haven't worked on as much, and discuss these questions with your group. What are we doing really well? What gaps do we have? And what could we ask our partners to help with? So I'm going to give you 15 minutes to discuss. If you run through one, you're welcome to move on to a different bucket. Please appoint someone to take notes so you can share the takeaways from your conversation. And because I'm going to ask you to come back into the main room here and take a couple minutes to share out your main takeaways from your discussion. So again, I'm going to stop sharing my screen here. I will drop the link to that graphic in the chat so that you can all see it yourselves. And then the questions: what are you doing well? What gaps do you have? And what could you ask your partners to help with? So those are the questions there. Any questions for me before you wing away into your breakout groups?
So what do you, this is always hard for people to remember when they get into the breakout rooms. So again, what are we doing well? What gaps do we have? And this could be with your Coke community or us in general over in Northern Sonoma County, whatever. And what could we ask our partners to help with? And when we talk about partners, for us, we're talking about Jordan, we're talking about Marshall, we're talking about the library and other partners that we've worked with, and then maybe partners we haven't worked with yet. How could they help us achieve some of these things that we want to get done to be more fire adapted? All right, so you ready to go into rooms, Tiernan?
Yep.
Okay, great. Pat Abercrombie, go ahead and throw us into rooms.